Welcome back to the Culture Encounters podcast. I am your host, Chad Omby, and we are here with the Culture Encounters founder, Amma. It's good to see you. How are ya?
I'm good, Chad. How are you? Well, it's
Uh,
Sunday here, so happy Sunday.
yes, happy Sunday. It's
Yeah.
definitely the weekends are appreciated so much more by me during the school year because you look forward to those 2 days.
Yep.
It's always great to have that to look forward to during the week for
It
sure.
does. And then goes by so quickly. And then
Oh
before
my
you know it,
gosh.
it's 7 p.m. Sunday and you're freaking out about Monday already.
It's true. I'm already there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all
uh,
good.
so before we get into our episode, which, as you can see in the description, is about raising a culturally intelligent child or children,
Hmm.
we just did an episode on Halloween.
Hmm.
And Halloween as a culture, as a cultural institution in multiple different locations. And I brought up a conversation you and I had briefly about how Halloween was not a thing for you growing up
Yeah.
culturally. In Ghana, it was not celebrated.
Hmm.
And some of the iconography of Halloween, like witches and ghosts and spirits,
Yeah.
where it was seen as a taboo to,
Hmm.
personify those things. So, talk a little bit about your experience growing up with that. What it was like for you when you came to America
Hmm.
and saw Halloween as an institution.
Yeah.
And is that still true today in Ghana? Is it still a taboo?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So, growing up, let me go back to growing up.
Right.
Halloween was something, the first time I heard the word Halloween was in a book. And I think I was probably middle school, which was what we call junior secondary school back then. I think that's the first time I heard of it. Wasn't sure what it was, but then when I inquired, I mean, I was told it was, some crazy thing the Americans do. All right.
Right, right,
And it didn't make sense to me because, let me tell you why. Africans, well, let me speak for Ghanaians. We are highly spiritual people,
right.
right? Good versus evil is a big deal. Anything that is considered evil or that represents fear or witchcraft is completely frowned upon. And so
Wow.
for me to hear that a witch is something we're dressing up as for Halloween is a complete no-no. And then from a religious perspective, um, I I don't believe that, and we don't believe that as a culture. So moving here to the United States has been challenging because in October, I look around and it's the skeletons, right, and the witches and the witches broom and the black cats and all those things are symbols of evil that we shun. So there is a play with what we call spirituality, and I think that it becomes a challenge for a parent like me who is raising a child in this culture whose friends are inviting them to Halloween parties and who all everyone is showing up trick or treating, right? And then I'm like, we're turning off our lights. We're not celebrating.
Right, right, right.
Well, I remember one year I turned off the lights on Halloween, and then my husband forgot that it was Halloween. So he came home and he turned on the lights. And then our doorbell rang a few minutes later, and I was like, we don't have candy, turn off the light. Yeah, so culturally, it's highly frowned upon in our culture. And it's not just mine. I noticed with most immigrant parents I talk to, they're like, yeah, we're not celebrating that. So
Right.
it's been hard trying to get our children to go the route and the thought process we have about Halloween, and it's a battle. Last night I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine from Ghana, and she struggled with that. She was like, "We're not celebrating that, right?" And so there is a challenge, but I also do understand that it's something that happens in this country is the norm. And so I respect people who celebrate it.
Sure.
I, as a teacher, when I was teaching in the classroom, when there was Halloween parade, I would go on the parade. I wouldn't dress up in anything. I'll probably wear orange usually, but I respected that. And I think being respectful, even if I'm not in agreement, being respectful about it and approaching it in more of a respectful way, I think is the way to go. Will I ever change my mind about Halloween? I probably won't.
Hmm.
But I'm respectful of it. I respect that it's a holiday that my country, my host country now celebrates. And now this is my home. So I do respect it. Do I agree with it 100%? No, I don't. I don't know if that would change, but that's where I stand.
Right.
But to answer the other part of your question, though, it was interesting. My husband and I were having this conversation yesterday, and we were talking to a friend about the same thing, and they were telling us that now in Ghana, like the celebrities are beginning to embrace Halloween, so there are costume parties, so it's becoming more westernized, and these western
Right.
influences are beginning to creep in. Nationally, I think Ghana frowns on it, but I think, as far as artists go, and something to celebrate, people are beginning to bring that in. So yeah, the world changes, the world is changing, and I feel like, even if we don't agree, that we need to be respectful, and,
Right.
and allow people to celebrate. If people want to celebrate Halloween, let them, but I personally don't.
Right. And I get that and respect that as well. And that
Mhm,
was brought up as well in the Halloween conversation, is that
mhm.
we do have, part of being culturally intelligent is we do have to understand that not every culture
Yeah,
celebrates the same things, and
yeah,
you need to respect that.
yeah.
But it brings up another conversation, the way like that was brought up
Hmm.
just now, a conversation for another day,
Hmm.
that I think would be really important to have, is the
Right.
idea of the other.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because from what I'm seeing, every
Mhm.
culture has that. Every
Yes.
culture has that concept of the other.
Hmm.
And that can lead to just, being like, oh, good versus evil, but it could
Yeah.
also lead to some very dangerous places,
Yeah.
as far as like, you had mentioned, when we're talking witches or whatever,
Hmm.
1692,
Yeah.
in America led to a genocide.
Yes.
The othering of people who were labeled
Mhm.
witches literally led to a genocide,
Yeah.
right here in Virginia, but
Yeah.
mostly, in the New England territories. But
Yes.
so it would be an interesting conversation, I think, at some point to have
Yeah, and
about,
I think we should. Yeah.
yeah, about like why,
Mhm.
why different cultures tend to other people who are different, and
Yeah.
what we can do using
Yeah.
cultural intelligence to
Yeah.
stop that.
Exactly.
Um, right. So yeah, thank you for your openness and honesty
Yeah. Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
I
Please
think
don't put any, negative comments in there. Okay. Don't
no,
come after me. It's just cultural.
no, no, and to speak for you, Amma is not advocating that you need to not celebrate Halloween, or that it's something that needs to be prayed away or anything like that. She's just saying that she personally chooses not to celebrate it, and that is 100%, her
Thanks for
right to do
copying me on
so.
that.
Yes, 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 yes. So, just providing some extra context for her.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no, to use a current colloquialism, you do you.
Yeah,
Is kind of,
definitely.
yeah, for sure. So, going now to, we're talking about, one thing, Ama, you brought up was, being an immigrant coming
Hmm.
to America, and the interactions you have with, being a parent and raising a child, or two children in this case,
Yeah.
in America.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about what it has been like for you as a mother,
Hmm.
and raising children in another country from
Yeah.
where you were raised. What has that experience been like for you?
A challenge.
Yeah.
It's definitely been challenging. It's challenging because I am still learning this culture. I've lived here over 20 years, but I'm still learning every day. I'm still understanding, and I'm still adjusting. So personally, I'm growing in that space of integrating into a culture like this, whilst at the same time trying to navigate what parenting means in a culture like this, right? So for example, I was in a conversation with someone this afternoon, and we're talking about my daughter. And I said, well, we're beginning to talk college. We're beginning to look at colleges. She's a junior now. And I have no idea how to navigate that world because I did not go to high school here. My
Right.
bachelor's degree is not from here either. I came here and went to graduate school. So it's more the advanced degree experience is what I have from here. But right up to my bachelor's degree, I've been overseas, right? And so I don't understand, the SAT and how all that plays out. So I'm learning and also in the process of trying to navigate that as a parent, guiding my child. And so I feel like that has actually allowed my child to be more independent in this space, because honestly, I don't know. She's taking an AP class, and I was like, what is AP? What does that mean?
Right,
I
right.
didn't know that. I don't. And I
Mhm.
think that speaks to the challenges a lot of immigrant parents face, is the fact that we're still learning as we're raising our children. So it hasn't been easy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not been easy. It's also understanding how my own culture influences how I raise my child. I come from a place where being an authoritarian parent is applauded, right? You have to be
Right.
strict, and it's the corporal punishment. It's my way or the highway, and that is applauded, right? Into coming to a culture, and especially now that I'm a family life coach as well, understanding that, ooh, that system does not work here. I could actually go to jail for doing,
Yeah.
spanking or whatever,
Right.
and trying to navigate that, and then there is this notion also that children raised in the West are usually very liberal, and that they're so like I've heard things like, oh, if you raise your child in America, you're going to spoil them, right?
Right.
And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I've met children in America who are not spoiled, whose
No, yeah.
parents, are well rounded, and their children are well rounded as well. So that is a myth, which is not true. So trying to balance all of that, trying to balance, is my child Ghanaian or is my child American? If my child is neither, then what are they, and how do I help them to embrace both cultures, creating their own third culture, right? And
Right.
so there's that challenge as well. There's a challenge of, okay, if I take them back home to visit, they're not Ghanaian enough, they don't fit in. Here, they're not fitting in quite as well. Let me tell you the story. So my son, my youngest, wrote an essay when he was in, I think, third or fourth grade, and he brought it home. And I'm reading this essay, and in the essay, he talks about this ethnic dish that I cook at home, at least once a week. And he thought every American child went home and ate the same dish
Right.
that he did, right? Did not understand that everyone else in his class were eating something else that he wasn't eating on a regular basis. So he starts talking about this dish called banku with okra stew, and then realizes that, oh, I'm the only person who
Mhm.
eats banku and okra stew, right? And so and so when he finds that out, it's surprising to him, but then it also opens his eyes to the fact that he's being raised differently than the other kids in his class. And I'm still trying to figure out how that affects a child like that, positively, negatively. But there is a lot of unknowns raising a child as an immigrant parent. But I think the best thing is to understand your child, and a
Right.
lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue. It's the way to go, and that's how we've been able to navigate it to this point.
Right. And I think dialogue is important for
Absolutely.
the kids,
Mhm.
and for you, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And hopefully one positive is that, the kids that are in classes with your children, they're
Mhm.
learning about other cultures and
Mhm.
by being around them. And let me preface by saying it is not your child's job to, be the poster children for other cultures. It is not their job.
Absolutely.
It is
Yeah.
not their job to do that.
Yeah.
But if an unintended consequence of, you know, other kids being friends with them and everything is they get to learn
Mhm.
about another culture, that's
Right.
incredible.
Right.
My best friend growing up is an immigrant.
Mhm.
And he's been on the show. Shout out to
Yeah, I
Ahad.
remember him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I learned so much just by being around him and his
Mhm.
family.
Mm.
And my life is so much better and
Yeah.
I had a much richer childhood because of it. So
Mm.
hopefully that can be a positive unintended consequence of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you'd mentioned the open dialogue, which I think, um, goes into the next part of this, which is cultural intelligence.
Mhm.
Briefly, words are hard. Define what cultural intelligence means to you,
Yeah.
and then why we should, why should we have these conversations about being culturally intelligent with our kids.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's try to define it. There are a lot of definitions out there on the internet, but there is a definition that really stands out to me. It's really simplistic, but I think that's why it stands out to me. It in a nutshell, cultural intelligence is the ability to relate and adapt and communicate with someone from a different cultural background. Right. So let's break it down. My ability to be able to connect with you, Chad, based on your own background, your own influences, your own culture, for me to be able to meaningfully engage with you
Hmm.
shows how culturally intelligent I am. Right. And it's kind of built on the premise of IQ and EQ, which is emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, being aware of your own cultural influence, your own biases, how your culture allows you to see the world, being aware of that, and then using that to pretty much engage meaningfully with someone else who is totally different from your own. I think that is what cultural intelligence is. It's prevalent. It's a word that is being tossed around now, especially if you're on LinkedIn. I see it all the time. Cultural intelligence, cultural intelligence. It's
Hmm.
being applied in the workplace. It's in schools now. Everyone is talking about being culturally intelligent, especially in this age where we're also looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work. That phrase, cultural intelligence, seems to be coming up very frequently. Now,
Right.
let's talk about why it's important. Why do we need to be culturally intelligent, and why do we have to raise children who are culturally intelligent? So let's go back to your example with your best friend growing up, right? So
Right.
he is a child of an immigrant and being living in the United States and now in school with you, right? And that
Right.
is how your horizons got broadened because you were engaging with him meaningfully as a best friend. I That is a great example because our world is becoming borderless, right? And immigration numbers are on the rise. It's not just immigrants coming from South America, it's immigrants migrating all over the world for jobs, for tourism. People are now in a place where they can actually afford vacation more than they used to back in the day economically. So people are traveling, so the world is moving, right? And so because the world is moving, our chances of engaging with someone from a different culture is higher, right? So there is a need for us to be culturally intelligent so we can meaningfully engage with people we come across. That is one reason. The other reason is that due to technological advancement, we're on the internet. We're meeting people from different cultures. We're involved when we did our Zooms online,
Right.
especially during COVID. We had kids from Ghana joining our Zoom. We had kids in England. We had kids all over Europe and the United States Zooming in, and we all found ourselves in one space. We are also now in the workplace where we're doing business with people from different countries and different cultures, right?
Right.
And so there is a need for us as parents and also our children to be well equipped to do business with the world. And if we don't, we will be left behind, unfortunately. I know that is such a strong statement to make.
You're right,
But
though.
the world we're living in now requires that we engage with everybody and everyone we come in contact with. If not, we will be left behind.
And I agree with that. That makes sense. But then also, like you had mentioned in the workforce, for example,
Yes.
um, something that I'm sure people have noticed is, you do have these initiatives of equity in
Mhm.
culturally diverse workplaces.
Right.
However, that needs to be meaningful, right?
Mhm.
And it needs to mean something, and it needs
Yeah.
to be. Um, I remember in like to kind of make my point, in college, I was a part of a cultural diversity and inclusion council,
Mm.
and really there were some that were incredibly active about this and really wanted to make the campus more inclusive, and hopefully it is now. I hope so.
Yeah.
But when it first started, there were many who were more concerned about where we were going to go eat for dinner and the bake sale we were going to do versus actually
Yeah.
creating an inclusive environment. And
Yeah.
it's because I think I worry that there are so many that just see diversity as a statistic, as a
Yeah.
number, as a
Yeah.
box to check,
Yeah.
culturally in the corporate world. And it needs to be meaningful. Like diversity means nothing without the inclusion piece. So you have to
Exactly.
actually have the inclusion piece. And the way to get there is through cultural intelligence.
Exactly.
And through respecting and embracing these other cultures. So
Mhm.
and that's something I was guilty of for a long time. We all have our own implicit biases, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it doesn't mean that you're like this horrible racist or this horrible prejudiced person. It
Mhm.
just means
Mhm.
due to your cultural background, you have
Yeah.
implicit biases that you need to be
Exactly.
aware of, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
cultural intelligence has helped, like learning about that. And I'm still not perfect. I'm a work in
Mhm.
progress, as we
Yeah.
all
We
are.
all are. Yeah.
But it has helped me through the years understanding, okay,
Mhm.
this is implicit bias. This is bias
Mhm.
that has been perpetuated by society.
Yeah.
I need to acknowledge that and
Yeah.
then move on, grow from it, and become a more accepting and intelligent person. And
Exactly.
and that's something that hopefully as the world continues to grow, we can get better with.